From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We all know that decisions are made elsewhere, and this meeting is just symbolic. Even if it's just a symbolic gesture, we are always against the G8.
As President Obama arrives in Italy, protesters also gather for the opening of the G8 summit. On the agenda, the global economic crisis, climate change, food security, and Iran. We'll speak with Italian economist Lauretta Napoleani. Then to Indonesia, where exit polls show incumbent President Yudhoyono has a clear lead. Newly declassified documents implicate him in the cover-up of the Indonesian military's role in the 2002 murders of 2 Americans and an Indonesian in West Papua. We'll speak with a Papuan human rights activist who worked with the Indonesian police and FBI to investigate the murders. She now lives in exile in Australia, and in this Democracy Now! Exclusive is speaking out on the investigations for the first time. Then former Georgia Congressmember Cynthia McKinney is back in the United States after being detained and deported from Israel.
What happened to us pales in comparison to what happens to the people of Gaza every day, to Palestinians every day.
McKinney was one of 21 activists seized by the Israeli military in international waters last week as they tried to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. We'll also be joined by filmmaker Adam Shapiro, who was detained and deported as well. All that and more coming out. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The ousted Honduran President Manuel Zelaya has agreed to a U.S.-backed plan for talks with the coup regime that overthrew him last month. On Tuesday, Zelaya met with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in Washington, D.C. It was Zelaya's highest-level talks with the Obama administration since the coup. Clinton said Costa Rican President Oscar Arias will mediate talks between Zelaya and the interim coup president, Roberto Micheletti.
Instead of another confrontation that might result in the loss of life, let's try the dialogue process and see where that leads, and let the parties determine all the various issues as they should. It's their responsibility to do that.
Zelaya and Micheletti are set to visit Costa Rica. Zelaya maintained his return to the presidency as, quote, non-negotiable.
These decisions have been taken so that in the next few hours things can stabilize and tranquility, calm, and peace will return to Honduras.
Pro-Zelaya demonstrations continued in Honduras on Tuesday despite the threat of further police violence. 2 unarmed protesters were killed Sunday when police opened fire on a peaceful demonstration. In China, thousands of government forces have swept into a Restive city in the Xinjiang region amidst the country's worst ethnic violence in decades. Tensions have flared in the city of Urumqi between China's ethnic Han Chinese and the Uyghurs, a Muslim minority. Some 156 people have been killed, more than 1,000 wounded, and more than 1,400 arrested so far. Both sides blame the other for the violence. Chinese President Hu Jintao has cut short a visit to Italy for the G8 summit, which opens today. On Tuesday, at least 36 people were arrested at an anti-poverty protest in Rome.
We all know that decisions are made elsewhere, and this meeting is just symbolic. Even if it's just a symbolic gesture, we are always against the G8.
We'll have more on the G8 summit after headlines. The Obama administration's announced it may continue the indefinite jailing of foreign prisoners even if military tribunals find them not guilty. On Tuesday, Pentagon General Counsel Jed Johnson said a prisoner's release will depend on whether the government deems them a threat, not how they're judged in court. The Bush administration took the same position. Johnson was speaking before the Senate Armed Services Committee. Also at the hearing, Obama administration officials offered diverging views on whether prisoners can be prosecuted for testimony obtained through torture. Justice Department National Security Division head David Criss said federal courts might reverse convictions based on statements obtained through coercion. But Vice Admiral Bruce McDonnell, the Navy's Judge Advocate General, said the admissibility of prisoners' statements should be based on whether they're, quote, reliable, not whether they were coerced or not. President Obama has appeared to repudiate a statement by Vice President Joe Biden that the U.S. wouldn't prevent Israel from attacking Iran. In an interview earlier this week, Biden said Israel has the sovereign right to attack Iran if it decides to. But on Tuesday, Obama said Israel does not have U.S. backing for an attack.
Are you giving Israel a green light? Absolutely not. And I think it's very important that I'm as clear as I can be, and our administration is as consistent as we can be on this issue. I think Vice President Biden stated a categorical fact, which is we can't dictate to other countries what their security interests are. What is also true is it is the policy of the United States to try to resolve the issue of Iran's nuclear capabilities in a peaceful way through diplomatic channels.
President Obama was interviewed on CNN by Ed Henry. In other Iran news, a group of Nobel laureates are urging the Iranian government to release all prisoners jailed in the protests against last month's disputed presidential elections. In a letter to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the laureates called for international pressure to ensure the prisoners' freedom. Signatories include the South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu and former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung. Their appeal came as Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad issued a new rejection of critics who say his re-election was fixed. In his first televised address since the election, Ahmadinejad called Iran's vote, quote, the freest and healthiest in the world. Here in the United States, Democrat Al Franken of Minnesota has been sworn in as the newest member of the Senate. Franken was seated on Tuesday following last week's Minnesota Supreme Court ruling that ended former Republican Norm Coleman's legal challenge to Franken's victory in the November elections. Seating Franken gives Democrats effective control of 60 seats, enough theoretically to overcome a Republican filibuster. Franken took the oath using a Bible belonging to the family of another Democratic senator from Minnesota, the late Paul Wellstone. Within hours of his swearing in, Franken announced his first legislative action, co-sponsoring the Employee Free Choice Act, which would make it easier for workers to vote on joining unions. President Obama has issued a vague response to criticism his administration is backing away from its advocacy of a government-run public health insurance program. On Tuesday, Obama released a statement saying, quote, I still believe that one of the best ways to bring down costs, provide more choices, and assure quality is a public option that will force the insurance companies to compete and keep them honest. I look forward to a final product that achieves these very important goals. The statement came hours after White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel told the Wall Street Journal he thinks it's more important to inject competition between insurance plans than it is to create a plan run by the government. Emanuel instead said the White House could back a plan that would trigger a public option only if private insurers fail to provide suitable care. Meanwhile, new questions are being raised about the concessions won by the healthcare industry in return for making cost-cutting deals with the White House to help pay for healthcare reform. The Obama administration is set to formally unveil a deal with major hospitals to save $145 billion in payments over 10 years. The pharmaceutical industry is also committed to an $80 billion fee cut over 10 years. But drug companies say Senate Finance Committee Chair Max Baucus has promised to oppose a House Democratic proposal that would drastically lower the drug prices for Medicare recipients previously covered by Medicaid. Last week, the retail giant Walmart backed proposals requiring businesses to provide employees with mandatory health insurance. But in return, Walmart wants to eliminate requirements that would force employers to cover part of the cost for workers covered by Medicaid. In South Carolina, the state Republican Party has voted to censure Republican Governor Mark Sanford following his recent admission of having an extramarital affair. Sanford has since also admitted to other unspecified infidelities with several different women. The censure vote stopped short of asking for Sanford's resignation. The South Carolina governor had been considered among the top contenders for the 2012 Republican presidential nomination before the scandal broke. In Washington, D.C., a city council ordinance recognizing same-sex marriages has gone into effect. The council approved the bill in May. It doesn't legalize same-sex marriage, but recognizes those performed in other states. Council members say they plan to introduce another resolution that would allow same-sex marriages in the district.